shutting man down. And this happens all the time, right? This is the normal and it's sometimes the other way around. But in this scenario, what happens often is our sympathetic nervous system is wired up during the day, right? And especially if she's, dealing with the kids and the PTA and the job and the family and the other, side rental business income, it's like she's dealing with all these things during the day. And then you just come to her and you're like, well, I want to have sex. And she's like, what? Like the jump between her overstimulated nervous system that is like not in a safe place and having sex is way too far. So it's actually about really relaxing that. And some people run a little bit more high strung than others. So this is an element that I actually call turning on your romantic wiring. And that is turning on the romance and the sensuality that has a woman's nervous system relax and her parasympathetic nervous system come online. And then she's in a place of safety and she feels more has the capacity to feel turn on. So a way that you can do this, if this is something that you're facing in your relationship, is don't have sex dates, but start with just having foreplay touch dates. Yeah. So it's have a romantic date, and I don't mean romantic like you go to dinner where you're on your phones and talking about your to-do list. That's not romantic.
That is really romantic. You're trading text messages at the dinner table. Romance.
No. Yeah. Get off the devices. Shut them off. Get a babysitter. Have time. Light some candles. Bring some flowers. Actually create that kind of that kind of space, because women relax when they have presence and attention. And when you can put the presence and attention on her and physically begin to touch her and see, like, is this what you like? Is like, what kind of things do you like to hear from me? Like, what kind of touch would you like? And I also, one specific one you can do is eye gazing. So it is actually scientifically proven that after 30 seconds of eye gazing, where you're actually just, staring essentially into the other person's eyes and just being there, breathing deeply, that the mirror neurons start to fire in both of you and both of your nervous systems relax and start syncing up together. So I recommend doing 2 minutes or so of this, because it takes a little while to get the jitters out. And sometimes people laugh and it's like this whole thing because they don't ever have this kind of depth of connection. But when you can really drop into this place and your emotional and nervous and physiological systems all sync up, and then it's like the relaxation happens and you're now in a flow state together. You're in an intimate flow state. And that from there, it's like maybe sex is possible, right? But it's like I see often men just frustrated and they just keep asking in the same way. And the woman just can't even get on board with it. So I went off on a little bit of a tangent, but there's one way.
No, I wanted to touch on that because in dealing with sex addiction, you primarily have, there are two components. What you generally have is what's mostly known as a love addict. And so they've primarily been abandoned. So they're chasing sex. Sex confirms you love me and you care about me. And they don't really know how to connect intimately, so they use sex to connect. The other side, and this is primarily women, are what's called sexual anorexics or love avoidance. And so sex and that, just you explained it. It's like, hey, no, it's a distancing technique. And most people are unaware that that's the dynamic at play, because women, the way the parenting dynamic shifted, young girls were smothered emotionally. And so a request for intimacy or sex, back off. Like, you're trying to get too close to me, that feels suffocating. And so one of the things we had to do in dealing with couples with sexual issues is the sex dates or intimacy dates also became where if the avoidant would primarily have to schedule them and set them up. It became their responsibility because what avoidants are great at is they schedule their work stuff, their kids stuff, their hobby stuff, all of it. You'll see this all the time. Detailed schedules. And the man will go, well, what about sex? Yeah, I just don't think about it. So they have to learn the schedule. Wait a minute. I also have to get myself in an emotional place and a physical place where I can accept intimacy. And so we would trade that responsibility, like 2 to 1. The avoidant would be the one who'd schedule 2 times to 1 time. Or now the addict would have to go in not looking at sex, but just like you said, this is about creating connection, not just getting laid. Sorry, but it's about connecting with her and not just using her because of your pent-up need to satisfy abandonment. And so it's understanding those dynamics and having a big conversation. How do you see that play out with your clients? Do you see the same thing where one tends to be more the avoidant as well?
Yes, often there is. And what this brings up for me is what I also see it flip in the other way sometimes. And I see the man become the avoidant in this. And I love the frame of like like someone living in the world of sex addiction and someone living in the world of sex avoidance. And what happens sometimes for men is if they're watching a lot of porn, they become the avoidant with their partner because their addiction is being fed outside of the relationship. And instead of actually turning towards, the energy and sharing their desire, which is incredibly vulnerable. I totally get that. And instead of doing that work, they turn to porn because it's easier. And then the woman's over here like, why won't you have sex with me? And he, has a myriad of problems and reasons that make it so it's like, that's really challenging. So it's interesting because the way I see this play out is in both. It's like both people having the responsibility to turn towards one another with their desire or with their avoidance. And it's like, you can have all the avoidance in the world and still turn towards your partner and say like, I don't feel like doing anything tonight. I know we have a sex date, but like, I don't feel like it. And then it's like my next question that I have, the receiver of that statement say is, well, what is it that you want? What is it that you want right now? And sometimes it's like, to cuddle. And then it's like, or it's like just to have a conversation about something other than the to-do list. Or sometimes it's I just want to know that you love me. I want to know that you still think I'm hot. It's like, there's all these different ways, or I want a foot massage, or, there's all these different things that we can do when we turn towards one another with either the avoidance or the addiction, and actually share it within the context of the relationship container. And that's when the connection gets built, even though you're dealing with these addictive tendencies.
Yeah. So what I hear in that is the power of saying no. And when someone says no to you, they're not rejecting you. They're loving you. They're letting you know authentically where they are. And instead of our typical reaction is rejection and, yell and scream, it's, wait a minute, they're not really saying no to you. They want something else. And really what they want is for you to ask questions and discover, because maybe they aren't aware. And so what they want is your presence. Oh, so it's no to this. What is it yes to? Can you give me more information? How can I be there for you? Which, in my experience, when you respond that way, the sex usually happens, because that's what they needed. They just needed to know that you were there for them and present in the relationship. Pardon me, and not hearing the no as an attack, but really as a request to get more intimate with me.
I have a good example of this that happened in a couple that I think might ground it, and that is a couple that I worked with. She didn't have, this is a very highly sexual being. Like, I can just see it. It's just in her, right? But yet she wasn't wanting to have sex. And this, they had a 2-year-old child. Often at this 2-year-old mark is when people reach out for support, because it's like the way that they have to orient in the relationship has changed. So they never figured out how to get back to having sex the way that they did before the child. So this is when we started working together. She didn't want to. And I mean, her stress levels with having a baby went up, dramatically, because she's primarily a stay-at-home mom, but also runs a part-time business. So she was in a very high nervous system. Her sympathetic nervous system was just off the charts all the time. And so he would come to her, with this energy of what, let's have sex. Come on. And he kind of had a little bit of the sex addict energy, Yeah. I mean, not severe, but I feel like it's like we all kind of live on this spectrum somewhere. Right. So I definitely see where they were both on this spectrum that you're talking about with the avoidant and the addict. Yeah. And so I was like, well, why don't we do this for the next, for the next week? Let's have you 4 nights this week, so they actually scheduled it and made it, just 15 minutes, 4 nights for 15 minutes. Let's actually have you as the man go, initiate a loving interaction, an intimate interaction that has no agenda for sex, non-sexual. Like let her really feel like you're just interested in her. Because that's the thing she was always saying is like, you just want to have sex with me, or do you love me? Like what, and just start there. And so, they did that for the first 3 nights and she says it was really enjoyable. He also said, he's like, yeah, this is actually nice. Like, I don't know why we don't normally do this. He actually enjoyed it. He just had never really given himself that space to do that before because of the male cultural programming. Yeah. And so on the 4th night, she's like, I don't know what happened. We ended up having sex, and it was the most amazing. It was the most amazing thing ever because it was so connected, and I felt so met intimately. And then he was like, she was more self-expressed and was the way that I've wanted her to be for our entire relationship on her own, just through, being met in this way. So it's that's what happened.
Yeah.
And then that shifted, in their relationship.
She was never saying no to sex. It was the wrong question. And yes. and so she was, as you said, she was dying to have sex, but sex is intimacy. And yes. Intimacy takes both people connecting, and that's vulnerability. And that's been my experiences. When I chased sex for sex, sure, I had some fun times, of course. But when I learned how to be intimate, sex went through the roof. All of a sudden it's a different, and whether the activities were crazy or not, it didn't matter. But see, when you're chasing sex, it's all about the activities. And when you're chasing connection, the activities don't really matter. Now, some great things come out of it, but the intensity, the reason we watch porn, the reason we chase, flirt, whatever, we're after that intensity. But connection breeds an intensity that's far beyond that. But we have such a taboo around it. What do you think for the single or couple who's listening right now, who's on the fence of, God, should I deal with this? Should I not deal with this? I'm still scared. What advice would you have for them? How would you help them? I think we talked about this offline, creating a bridge. How would you create a bridge to be able to look at it? What I just want to say about this too is like, you're ready when you're ready. And it's, like maybe this, plants a seed, and maybe that seed doesn't come to fruition until a few months from now or next year, but it's like actually begin the process of just looking at, how fulfilled and self-expressed and empowered do you feel in your relationship, in your sexuality and in your life. And if you're looking at like, I feel a little bit dull, or I feel a little bit like muted. I don't feel like I can really be seen and let myself out. And
and play, and it's like life's kind of just mediocre